The Best Nest. That's the title. The author and illustrator is P.D. Eastman. Mr. Bird was happy. He was so happy he had to sing. This was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest. In all the world, my nest is the best. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It's not the best nest, she said. I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now. So they left their old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. I wonder if someone lives here. But somebody else had already moved in. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it. I wonder if someone will live here. Let's see. You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot. So they went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on the roof. I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right. I wonder, let's see who's coming. But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. This is the house for mail. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next house. And here it is, right here. They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big, said Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First they got hay, then they got some soda straw and broom straw, and they got sweater string. They got some stocking string and mattress stuffing. They got some horsehair and some manhair to make their nest. Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, and all the stuffing, all the horsehair, and all the manhair they could carry. They took it back to build their nest. Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish their nest. This nest is really the best, said Mrs. Bird. I want to stay here forever. I wonder if they're going to be able to stay here forever. There's something here. I wonder what's going to happen. Mr. Bird was very happy too. He flew on top of his house and he sang, I love our house, I love our nest, in all the world our nest is the best. He was so busy singing he didn't see Mr. Parker coming. I wonder what Mr. Parker does. Oh, every day at 12 o'clock Mr. Parker came, and Mr. Parker came to pull a rope. The rope went up to the bird's new nest. And what did it ring? It rung the big bell. The rope rang the big bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Boing! Boing! Oh, do you think Mrs. Bird likes that noise? Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could fly. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string stuffing and horsehair and manhair. Where was Mrs. Bird? I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high, he looked low, he looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. He looked down into the chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. He looked down into the water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. Then he saw a big fat cat with a big fat smile with some pretty brown feathers near the fat cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. Oh dear, he cried. The big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird. Mr. Bird flew away. He was very sad. I'll never see Mrs. Bird again, he cried. It was getting dark. It began to rain. It rained harder and harder, and Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something. Oh, what is this? Anyone remember what it was? It was their old house, the old whole house that Mrs. Bird didn't like. I'll go inside, said Mr. Bird. I'll rest her until the rain stops. But look who's inside. Mr. Bird went in, and there was Mrs. Bird singing there. I love my house, I love my nest. In all the world, this nest is the best. You're here, he said? I thought you didn't like this old nest. Mrs. Bird smiled. I used to not like it, she said, but a mother bird can change her mind. You see, there is no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird. And when the egg popped open, the new bird thought so too. The end.